Wisdom, folly, and choice. Wisdom, obviously we talked about a moment ago, taking what has been told to you and how to apply it, taking commandments, taking instruction, and then applying those things. That's what wisdom is. Folly is the opposite. It's to hear what the right way is, what the safe course is, and then to ignore it or make excuses for not following after it. And in all of these things, we indeed have a choice that we can make. On more than one occasion, I've had a young man come to me and want to talk. And they start off by saying, see, there's this girl. Now, you know where that conversation is going to lead to. You can already fill in the blanks that I've left. And not only can you understand and see the immediate consequences of what that conversation was going to entail, but also the long-lasting effects that it was probably going to have. On more than one occasion, I've had a married man come to me and say, see, there's this woman that I work with, this woman that I know, this woman that I used to know. And you know the immediate consequences, and you know the long-term effect that that would have upon the lives not just of them, but of those they're in contact with. That's why this lesson is important. There's been very few congregations that I have seen that have a huge multitude of men who are prepared and preparing themselves to step into the roles of being either a deacon or an elder. And the reason being is because of things like the husband of one wife or believing children. And that being the number one thing that's often under discussion, it's only when a person reaches a certain age that congregations or even individuals start to think about those qualifications. But it's not when they're young. It's not when they're about to make those crucial decisions that are going to have long-reaching and ranging and very consequential ramifications in their life. The reason that this lesson is important is because our young people, no offense, don't have a clue about what's coming. And it's not their fault because they haven't experienced that. God be blessed and your parents be blessed that you don't know those things yet by experience. So the only way you can know them now is by instruction, by your father, by your mother sitting down with you and instructing you about what life is about to bring your way. And to tell you that these proverbs are things that you can read the immediate, but as it says, the New King James uses the word enigma. It has the idea of a puzzle that you have to put together. That when God instructs you about something, do not commit adultery. Don't commit sexual immorality. When it gives you these commandments, if you only look at the commandment and say, so long as I don't do that, then I'm safe, the Bible says, again, very bluntly, the Bible says, you're a fool. And this wise man says that you're supposed to fear the Lord, and that is the beginning of knowledge and understanding. Because the Bible does not just warn us against the exact acts of whatever the sin may be, but also the things that lead up to them. And things that in and of themselves may even appear to be innocent and may not even have any type of in and of themselves sin attached to it. But if you follow that path, the Bible says you're a fool to do that. And so as we talked about last week, to hate those things which are evil, to be terrified of those things that are evil, and to hold on to those things which are good will keep you from the paths of this immoral woman. From having that conversation where you have to sit down with an elder or a preacher one day and say, see, there's this woman or this girl. See, there's this woman that I work with, this person that I know. And now I've destroyed everything in my life as a result. If we fear it from the beginning, the fear of the Lord is the beginning. If we fear those things from the beginning, if we hate those things from the beginning, some of these young men will be elders and preachers and deacons and great leaders in the church. And they will raise good, godly children. And there will be women who will be seeking out for themselves good, godly men instead of those who are of the world, to keep you from the path. That's one of the things that you're going to see throughout this lesson this morning. And so Proverbs, again, as we said, is about choosing between wisdom and folly. It says in Proverbs 1, verses 20 through 33, that wisdom is described as being like this really nagging woman. She is out in the courtyards, and she is raising her voice in verse 20 in the open squares. She cries out in the chief concourses and all the openings of the gates of the city. She speaks her words. How long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? Scorners delight in their scorning. Fools hate knowledge. Turn at my rebuke. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you. I will make my words known to you, because I've called and you refused. I've stretched out my hand and no one regarded, because you disdained all of my counsel and would have none of my rebuke. Then it says, most tragically in verse 26, I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then you will call on me, but I will not answer. You will seek me diligently, but you will not find me, because you hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel, despised my every rebuke. Therefore they shall eat of the fruit of their way, and be filled to the full with their own fancies. For the turning away of the simple ones will slay them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. But whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure and without fear. Why should you listen to wisdom while you're young, while you have the opportunity, before you get involved in something where you have to say, see, there was this person? The reason you listen to wisdom is so that you do not ever come near to such a thing. Because when you get in the middle of that situation, in that circumstance, and then you say, well, how can I get out of it? How can I fix it? Wisdom is going to laugh at you and say, I told you not to go down that path to begin with. I told you to stay away from it. And you didn't. And so wisdom is not something that you even possess. And you don't possess the wisdom to find your way out of it. And that's why you would have to go to someone else and say, what am I to do? And then it's all about repairing. But there's no more prevention to be had. Calamity comes, and what a devastating effect it has. This way is one of the ways that we can live in life is to indeed to pursue wisdom. In Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 13, it says this, get wisdom and get understanding. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will preserve you. Love her, and she will keep you. There's that idea of clinging once again. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and all you're getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she will promote you. She will bring you honor when you embrace her. She will place on your head an ornament of grace. A crown of glory she will deliver to you. Hear, my son, and receive my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in the right paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered, and when you run, you will not stumble. Take firm hold of instruction. Do not let go. Keep her, for she is your life. These first several chapters of the book of Proverbs is written from the wise man to his son, and he's giving him instructions. And he starts out at the beginning, look, don't consent with those people who are evil. Don't cast in with them. Don't have fellowship with them. Because if you do, you're just as guilty of the things that they are committing as if you were doing it yourself. So don't do that. Because if you follow that course, you're going to end up in a place where you don't have any type of understanding or ability to get yourself out of. Instead, chapter 4 tells us, embrace wisdom. Embrace her like she is your spouse. Hold on to her. Be wise. Look for the right way to do things. And if you do, you will preserve your life and keep yourself from so many troubles in life. Some people, however, do not choose that way. And so back in Proverbs chapter 2, and starting at verse 10, Proverbs chapter 2 and starting at verse 10, when wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you. This is why, or what from? To deliver you, verse 12, from the way of evil, from the man who speaks perverse things, from those who leaves the paths of righteousness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perversity of the wicked, whose ways are crooked and who are devious in their paths. Also, verse 16, to deliver you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house leads down to death, and her paths to the dead. None who go to her return, nor do they regain the paths of life. to keep you from both of these people, to preserve your life, and to keep you from going into that person. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 7. And that's where we're going to be spending most of our lesson. We'll be going back and forth through many passages in Proverbs, but primarily Proverbs chapter 7. So again, he's writing to his son, and he tells him at the beginning of chapter 7, "My son, keep my words and treasure my commands within you." Keep. Notice these words. He uses keep and treasure in verse 1. Again, he uses the word keep my commands and live. And make my law, notice this, as the apple of your eye. Bind them. There's that idea of being bound to something again. Bind them on your fingers. Write them, something you take with your own hand and you do. Write them on the tablet. Where do we write it? We're supposed to write it upon our hearts. Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. He talks about over and over again this idea of being kept from the immoral woman. And notice that he says, say to wisdom, you are my sister. I think that's an interesting phrase. If you're a young man and you have a sister, and there was a girl that you were interested in, somebody that you were wanted to date, to bring home to meet the parents or whatever it may be, your mom and dad probably have a lot of discretion when it comes to that. But if you have a sister, your sister can probably pick up on things that other people may not. Your sister is in a much better position to choose and to be more understanding of what's going on in your particular generation at that particular time and probably with this particular person. Say to wisdom, you are my sister. Say to wisdom, you are my nearest kin. Those people in your family who will not hold back when they tell you, you don't need to be fooling with that person. And that's what he's talking about. He's saying you don't need to be fooling with this person whatsoever. You have no business fooling with this person. Wisdom is meant to be a deliverer. In verses 6 through 9, notice as he says this in verses 6 through 9, we are not to be naive about who this person was. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice and saw among the simples, I perceived among the youths a young man devoid of understanding. Passing along the street, notice where he was at. He was near her corner. We saw that a few moments ago about not pondering the path. Near her corner. And he took the path to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark of night. Don't be naive. Chapter 4, verses 14 and 15. Go back to that to once again. When it says that there are people who rejoice in doing evil. Chapter 4, verse 14 and 15. Do not enter the path of the wicked. Do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not travel on it. Turn away from it and pass on. The reason that this young man gets caught is because he constantly let himself be in the presence of danger. The lion, the devil is like a lion who's a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. In Job, it talks about Satan walking to and fro on the earth. Satan is always looking for an opportunity. And if you're hanging out in the corner where these types of things take place, you're going to get caught up in it. Do not be a fool. Do not think that you can get close to it and not be burned by it. Don't think that you can flirt with it and not be burned by it. Every person that I have ever talked to about any of these situations started out this way. See, there was this person, and then next, I never thought it would go that far. And the reason being is because when it first got started, when it first became apparent, when there was that lingering stare, that uncomfortable conversation, the way in which you hung out by yourselves together when you never should have, it always ends up the same way. Brethren, it's not a way it happens, it is the way it happens. Every time. Every time. And so don't be a fool. The man says, be wise. Listen to understanding. Let wisdom be the thing that you hold on to and don't give yourself into it. But what does she look like? This immoral woman. Notice in verse 10, he begins by talking about the way that she is dressed. Proverbs chapter 7 and verse 10. He says this, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. In other words, she knows what she's doing. She's not a harlot, but she dresses like one. First clue. First clue. If she dresses like a person of the world, she is a person of the world. She dresses like a harlot. She is a harlot. She knows what she's doing. She's got the heart of one. If that's what she has to do to get your attention, she knows what she's doing. Somebody compared it to this, is that, yes, all of us admire when somebody drives up in this fancy sports car. And us guys, we see that fancy sports car, and we look over at that sports car, and they hit the gas to make fun of our little, four-cylinder vehicle. They can't keep up with them. And they hit that pedal, and when that light turns green, they take off to show off. Women, don't be like that car. You don't have to do that. And you shouldn't do that. My sisters in Christ, do not do that. If that's the means by which you're trying to catch a man, hear what the Proverbs writer says to you. You may not be a harlot, but don't dress like one. Don't act like one. You know what you're doing. Young men, don't be a fool. You know what they're doing. So watch out for it. In the next few verses, verses 11 through 13, he says this: she is loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent, that is shameless face, she says to him the words that we'll read next. What he first says is that she is indeed loud and rebellious. What she lacks, I heard someone say this past week, what she lacks in discretion, she makes up for in volume. In other words, she is loud. She is an attention getter. She's going to do whatever she can. The young girl that laughs the loudest at a joke that's not that funny, be careful. The girl that always has to be the loudest person in the conversation, be careful. The one who uses that loudness just in volume, but also in this, it talks about how it is that she is rebellious. So really the things that she's talking the loudest about is that nobody's going to tell me what to do. My husband, as she's going to talk about in a minute, he didn't treat me right. Let me tell you what's wrong in the world. And it's putting it in the place of this as being a woman. What the Bible holds in high esteem is the woman who has a quiet and gentle spirit. This loud and rebellious woman is one that's not going to stay at home. She's not going to learn to be a homemaker. She's not going to be the one who's going to take care of the kids when they're born. And she's not going to be the one who's going to be kept from doing the things, going out with her friends and doing things just because of you or the kids. She's going to do her own thing. So young men, if you want to have a miserable life, date and marry this woman and see how miserable your life is going to become. Go over to Proverbs chapter 9, verses 13 through 18. Proverbs 9, 13 through 18. A foolish woman is clamorous. That means she's boisterous. She is simple and knows nothing. For she sits at the door of her house on a seat by the highest place of the city to call to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And as for him who lacks understanding, she says to him, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her gates are the depths of hell. The Bible is very judgmental, is it not? Very judgmental about this boisterous woman who knows nothing. What I believe he's talking about there is not so much that she does not have understanding or knowledge of anything, but that she's playing that role. A young woman who is always the victim. A young woman who always needs the knight in shining armor to come and rescue her is a dangerous trap. We're not supposed to be raising our young women that way either. Our young women are to be strong and reliant upon our God. And her quiet and peaceful spirit is her strength. But to be loud and boisterous, to say, I need someone to help me. I need someone to rescue me. I don't have anyone to protect me. She's calling out to the simple ones, come up here and help me. Come up here and help me. And what happens is you get drug into that trap and you end up getting killed by it. That's why you have to be careful of those conversations when you might have with someone that you work with, when they start talking about how hard and difficult their life has been, especially with their husbands or their families. It's a trap. And she may not even know that she's laid it out there. But it's a trap, and we're supposed to be aware of it and be cautious of it. Not only is that, but she disrespects her home because she's never there. She's not going to stay home, and she's not going to keep the home, and she's not going to watch out for the ways of her household as a wise woman is supposed to. Proverbs 14 and verse 1, the latter part of that verse says, the foolish pulls it down with her hands, speaking of the house that is supposed to be built by her. In Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 6, it says this, that lest you ponder her path of life, her ways are unstable. You do not know them. So what the wise man says is, don't think about her paths. Don't be curious about her paths. Don't become involved in her paths. Don't become the rescuer of her in her paths. You don't know them. Her ways are unstable. And so again, the wise man says, do not be foolish, but stay away from this immoral woman. She is aggressive as well. She, with a face with no shame, goes out and she finds him, and she is the initiator of the kiss. She goes out and finds him and lays the kiss upon his lips. In Proverbs 2 and verse 19, none who go to her return, nor do they regain the paths of life. Proverbs 21 and verse 9. Proverbs 21 and verse 9 says this, better to dwell in the corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Proverbs 27, 15 and 16. This one is especially judgmental. Proverbs 27, verse 15 and 16. A continual dripping on a very rainy day and a contentious woman are alike. Whoever restrains her restrains the wind and grasps oil with his right hand. Try to hold on to oil in your hand. That's like trying to hold on to this woman that we're talking about. Young men, you want to guarantee yourself a miserable life, date and marry this woman. That's what the writer is saying. He is saying to his son, do not go near this woman. The Israelites believed, according to some commentators, that what he's actually talking about in Proverbs chapter 7 is idolatry. And that it has this appeal to it that seems to be satisfying. And many times the way it will come into your heart is through this idea that you can see in an immoral woman. And I believe that there's a lot of truth to that, even if that's not what the exact context was. Because when you think about how sin acts, this is how it acts. It's loud and boisterous, and it gets your attention. It tells you that to do the things that are contrary to the will of God is going to be fun and is going to be exciting. That is something that's going to tell you, you don't have to stay at home. Don't worry about your home. Go out into the world and have fun and explore and do all these things. But don't worry about your home. The home really doesn't mean anything. That's just a place where you live. And it's very aggressive in its nature. It's going to talk to you about how you deserve these things and ought to have these things. And it's going to come to you. You don't have to sit back and wait on it. It's going to find you out. Because sin, just like this woman, has no shame whatsoever. Is not concerned about the embarrassment and the problems and the difficulties it's going to cause. It doesn't matter what vows are violated, what principles are transgressed. It doesn't matter the instruction that was given. This is the way of an adulterous woman, Proverbs 30 and verse 20. This is the way of an adulterous woman. She eats and wipes her mouth and says, I have done no wickedness. In other words, she goes and she does the things that she does and compares it to eating of a meal. And it's a meal that was not hers to have. It was not one that she was supposed to be taking part in. It didn't belong to her. She eats the meal, she wipes her mouth, says, I haven't done anything wrong. That's the way of the immoral woman. And young women, that's the way of an immoral man. It works both ways. She eats and wipes her mouth, says, I haven't done anything wrong, and has no shame or embarrassment upon what she has done. She tells this young man lies in Proverbs chapter 7 again, verses 14 through 20. Proverbs 7, 14 through 20. She says, I have peace offerings with me. Today I have paid my vows. So I came out to meet you diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. I have spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves in love. For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the appointed day. What she says at the beginning is, I'm really a good person. I've got my peace offerings. This peace offering was like a offering of thanksgiving. Leviticus 7, you can read about it. And when you read about that, it's one of the things that this meal had to be eaten before the end of the day, or at least by the next day. And you could have someone eat this meal with you. And so this woman says, I have a lot of things to be happy about and joyful about. And so I've offered my blessing or my sacrifice to God. And I have this peace offering with me. And I need to share it with someone. My husband's gone, so let me share it with you. I'm really a good person, though. Notice I've offered the sacrifices. I'm giving thanks to God. I'm just wanting to share in this with you. I'm really a good person. And the wise man says, do not be fooled by it. Do not be a fool. Do not go near her. But this is the way it happens. There's nothing wrong going on here. Proverbs 23 and verse 28. Proverbs 23 and verse 28. She also lies in wait as for a victim, and increases the unfaithful among men. By her talking to you about how religious and good she is, she actually makes more and more people unfaithful to their God. That's why it's a dangerous thing, brethren. That's why it's a dangerous thing for us to assume that associations with the world, evil company corrupts good habits, that those type of corruptions will not affect us, because they'll talk to us about how good they are. But we know the reality is this: it increases the unfaithfulness. It doesn't increase the faithfulness, it increases the unfaithfulness among us. In Proverbs chapter 9 and verse 17, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. In other words, it gives the appeal that even though this thing is bad, it is good for food, is pleasing to the eye, and is able to make one wise. And that's where we transgress and fall. She tells him that we'll have love till morning. She promises him that this will be a good time and nothing that he will have to regret in the future. We will have a great time together. Let us come take our fill together. Notice in verse 17, she says, I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. She's put this myrrh and aloe and cinnamon on her bed. You know what myrrh and aloe and cinnamon was used for? Cremation, or burial rather. Preparing for burial. The corpses were wrapped in it. So yes, you want to go to her, this is what she's going to wrap you in. These beautiful spices, but it's to cover up the stench of what's actually taking place. She tells the lie that nothing bad is going to happen. The last barrier is that there are no negative consequences to this action. This is something that some of us who are maybe more mature have to understand. If we have to make an excuse for what it is, if we have to justify what it is, it's something you should not be engaging in, most likely. There's no consequences. My husband's on a journey. He's not coming back to a certain day. He's taking money with him. He's doing these other, don't worry about it. Nothing bad, no consequences are going to follow. Galatians 6, 7, and 8 tells us that whatever a man sows, that he also is going to reap. In Proverbs chapter 6, verses 26 through 29, it says this: For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread. There have been so many times that we have witnessed that. And an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire to his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be seared? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. And we saw how it started just a few moments ago. Back in Proverbs chapter 7, as we bring that chapter to close to a conclusion. Proverbs 7, 21 through 23 says this: that with her enticing speech she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips she seduced him. Immediately he went after her as an ox goes to the slaughter. The New King James says, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. Really, the ESV has a better translation when it says, or as a stag is caught fast, till an arrow struck his liver. As a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know that it would cost him his life. One of the things that we often tell young people, don't be like a dumb animal. And that's what is being described here. All three of these animals that are being talked about, like an ox to the slaughter, the sacrificial ox. And notice that it says that immediately he goes into her. What happens is that he didn't immediately from the very beginning go into her. It was after she had enticed him, after she had spoken to him. The imagery is this, that when you have an animal that's have to be coerced into its stall so that it can be slaughtered for a sacrifice or whatever else it may be, they'll resist at first. They don't want to go in there. And so you have to prod them, you have to poke at them, you have to push at them. But then when they finally given up, they'll all at once, and without warning, they'll just leap into that stall. That's what this young man did. He hung out in her paths. He listened to what she had to say. He considered the options that was laid before him. It seemed like something that wasn't going to have any consequences. And so he said, okay, and jumped into it. He never knew that he'd end up there. But when that happens, it's almost like an all-at-once type of thing. That's why it's compared that way. Or it's like a stag or a deer that's brought within the range of the hunter's arrow. It's laid out the corn, it's laid out the feed so that the deer will come close enough so he can be struck with the arrow into his liver. He's like a bird that's always flittering around trying to find something new, something interesting, something tasty, something he can fill his belly with. And he didn't realize that, okay, well, this time it cost me my life. All these other times it worked out okay. But this time it cost me my life. And that's how it happens. So the wise man gives three examples of these animals. And basically to say, don't be a dumb animal. Animals do these things. We as humans should not. Proverbs 22 and verse 14 says that the mouth of an immoral woman is a pit. He who is abhorred by the Lord will fall there. Interesting. The mouth of an immoral woman is a deep pit. But the one who is abhorred by the Lord will end up there. So in other words, if you reject God's wisdom, this is where you're going to end up. Not just the commandment, brethren, but if you reject God's wisdom. So he ends this way. Now therefore listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths, for she has cast down many wounded. And notice at the end of verse 26 that all who were slain by her were strong men. Her house is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. So the question I'm going to leave with you is, are you paying attention? As I said, this is the lesson that your young people were studying about this morning. If you want to guarantee them a rough and difficult life, don't teach them to avoid this woman's path. If you want to guarantee that your children and your grandchildren will not be faithful to the Lord, don't warn them to hate this woman's path. But if you want the fear of the Lord to be their guiding light, teach them wisdom, how to identify and how to avoid. What is the proper response when these types of things happen? And God bless us as we try to fight this battle, because it is real. And I know that the conversations I've had in the past, see there's this young girl, see there's this woman, will probably not be the last conversations I have to have about that. And they probably won't be the last incidents that you will encounter among brethren either. But we can stem that tide if we will, by the grace of God, teach them the right ways so they may maintain their purity. If you're subject to the invitation this morning, I appreciate your patience. If there's something that we can do to help in any way whatsoever, this is a real battle. And if you need help with any of those things, please let us know. As together we stand and sing, won't you come?